Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is James Corbett, publisher of the CorbettReport.com. He's also an editorial writer for the International Forecaster. He's speaking to us from Japan, where he has worked and lived since 2004. Welcome back to the show, James.
Thank you for having me on. Always a pleasure to talk to someone from my home and native land.
From your hometown.
There you go.
Calgary. James, over half of Japanese firms in a poll have said they have no plans to give their employees pay raises this year. Is that pretty typical in Japan?
I would say it's hardly surprising, because this is part of an endemic situation that has been in corporate Japan for the last few decades. Since the popping of the bubble in the 80s, Japan, which is a pretty conservative society in a lot of different respects, has gone into its shell, I would say. And it's going to take an awful lot to get people out of the mindset that they are in a deflationary environment. And as we've talked about before, there are signs that the economy here is picking up. I believe 8th straight quarter of GDP rise, which is the first time in 3 decades that's happened. So there are things happening here, but it's going to take a while for that to filter down to the corporate level. And until it does so and wages start rising, I think it's going to be a tough nut to crack with regards to the deflationary spiral that Japan has been in. How are you going to crack that if you're not getting consumer spending up? And how are you going to get consumer spending up when there is the sword of Damocles hanging over the retail economy here that next year, supposedly, the 8% consumption tax is going to raise to 10%. So there are some definite roadblocks ahead that need to be overcome if the Japanese economy is going to really translate this momentary pickup into something more like an actual recovery.
Is it true the yen is one of the strongest currencies in the world right now?
It certainly has been picking up, and I can say that from personal experience because a lot of the subscribers to my website are Americans paying me in US dollars, which I then convert to Japanese yen, and I've definitely seen the yen gaining against the dollar in recent months, much to my chagrin, I suppose, but and to the chagrin of a lot of exporters, obviously, in the export-driven Japanese economy. So that might be another type of headwind that the Japanese economy is facing right now.
100 bullet train cars are being pulled off the tracks because they have faulty wheels. Is this fallout from the Kobe Steel scandal?
I have heard about the problems with regards to some of the metalwork in the casing, the frame of the bullet trains, and the latest results show that these frames are supposed to be 7 millimeters thick. They were 4.5 millimeters thick. They were basically cutting corners. So that's why the crack that was found, the 14 centimeter crack that was found in one of these frames was found. And so now they are taking the precaution of trying to redo all of the bullet trains that are currently on the tracks. This is obviously a pretty large concern for Japan, which is pretty much known for its safety and caution with regards to such things, and especially on the bullet train, the iconic system of Japan, which has never experienced a large failure or safety concern like this. So it's something that's kind of unprecedented. So you can imagine that the government will take it very carefully with regards to mandating how the inspections proceed from here.
Japan's January industrial output fell 6.6%. Any idea why?
I imagine they're going to blame it on seasonal downturn and things like that, but I'm not sure that will be an adequate explanation for such a large drop-off. As to what may really be behind it, I'm not sure. Certainly we have seen some volatility in the markets over the past month or two, which may have translated into some sort of pullback in the manufacturing and production boom, but one wouldn't expect that to have already taken place. One would expect that coming in the coming months. So I'm not sure if there's an adequate explanation that I see on the table at this point.
Well, perhaps it's the strong yen. Overseas buyers don't want Japanese goods.
that's definitely a part of it. As I say, in an export-dependent economy, having a weak currency is always seen as a good thing, and the strengthening of the yen is usually tied to a downturn. Again, downturn in the markets, which generally translates into a downturn in production. So I'm not sure the causality is in the right direction there, but it could have something to do with that.
We'll have more with James Corbett right after the break.
Aben Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Aben's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at abenresources.com.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with James Corbett. James, India has now surpassed China as the world's fastest growing economy. Is that much of a surprise?
Well, I guess it depends who you speak to. I think I can attest in my lifetime I've been hearing about the potential for the rise of the Indian economy for decades now, but it's always been the question of bureaucratic red tape and the kind of the unwieldy nature of the Indian state, which has always been blamed for hampering the potential for the Indian economy to really grow. So it's been predicted, as I say, for a very long time. Are we starting to finally see it, or is this just a momentary blip as perhaps China is going through some transition pains, as it were, trying to wrench their economy into a more domestic economy rather than export dependent? It remains to be seen, obviously. But at any rate, India seems to be in the driver's seat at this particular moment, and the real question is, what are they going to do with that position?
Well, I've heard that India would surpass China, but it does have a problem. Its best asset is that it's a democracy. The worst thing about it, it's a democracy.
It certainly makes it more difficult for them to instantaneously go and tinker with the economy one way or another, as the Chinese government is wont to do whenever there's any sign of a problem in, for example, the Chinese markets. As we know, the Chinese government is usually there with some sort of backstop or some perhaps lining up of officials in the firing squad to make sure that nobody gets out of line. So obviously that might not be one of the options on the table for the Indian government. It certainly puts a little bit of a damper on their ability to influence things. So I think there might be something to that adage. But I think the interesting part of this, of course, is the changing dynamics and relations geopolitically that's happening on top of this economic growth, because obviously China is trying to convert its economic growth in recent decades into geopolitical clout, and they're doing that through things like the One Belt, One Road idea that they're having to construct this great shipping route system that's going to connect China to the world. Well, as a counter to that, the U.S. and Japan and Australia have been talking more openly with India about making this not the Asia-Pacific region, but the Indo-Pacific region, and really strengthening India's relative position there. And we've seen some of that playing out in some of the tensions between China and India over things like the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. So it'll be very interesting to see if perhaps India tries to use some of this growing economic clout as a challenge to China's supremacy in the region.
Any play about Prime Minister Trudeau's visit to India in Japan?
I haven't seen it covered in the Japanese media, so maybe it didn't make too much of a wave over here, but I've certainly seen the responses on social media from Canadians.
Well, even the late-night talk shows in the U.S. are making fun of his trip.
It's quite some iconic images, isn't it? And probably not going to be downplayed easily.
We'll have more with James Corbett right after this.
Arctic Star Exploration, operated by a team of proven mine finders, is focused on diamonds in Finland and the Northwest Territories of Canada. A work program is planned for our Finland property that contains diamond-bearing kimberlite. Arctic Star trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ADD, and the Frankfurt Exchange, symbol 82A1. Please visit our website at arcticstar.ca or call us at 604-689-1799.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
I haven't heard about the latest rumblings on this front, but obviously this has been going on for a long time. And the latest reports, I've just seen the headlines, there is a new push for an independence referendum going on, a new campaign that's launching. Extremely interesting coming, obviously, at this time where Taiwan and China are really entering an interesting phase of their relationship, because obviously at this point China, as I say, is a growing economic power that is trying to convert that into geopolitical clout, and the Chinese leadership, the Chinese Communist Party leadership, has always and still very much, I don't know if lusts after is quite the right word, but at any rate certainly values the idea of Taiwan as part of the one China that is reflected in the one China policy, and they're not giving up on that. And there's no sign that they're going to roll over anytime soon on that issue. So for a long time, U.S. military planning as to potential situations that might arise in the Asia Pacific have centered around the idea if China were to go and to try to take Taiwan, that could be the start of all-out warfare. And it still remains a real possibility. And so I think Taiwan, perhaps recognizing that, is very interested in trying to push their independence while they might still have a chance at it, because as China grows in geopolitical as well as economic clout, perhaps that window of opportunity closes.
Well, would they even recognize a vote done in Taiwan because they don't have voting on the mainland?
Well, the Chinese government certainly wouldn't recognize such a vote, but would other institutions. Taiwan is not a member of the UN or other international organizations, but potentially, if there was enough of a kind of diplomatic push for it, one might imagine that the UN or some other organization might officially recognize Taiwan, which would obviously completely upset the status quo and upset, to say the very least, the Chinese Communist government.
Your thoughts on China's president becoming a long-term dictator for life?
Yes, very interesting turn. I don't think it was completely surprising, as we covered when we were talking about the Chinese Communist Party's twice-a-decade meeting that they had recently, where Xi did that 3-hour speech about his philosophical thought that was embedded in the Constitution and all of that. We saw the signs that they were heading towards something like this, but for those who might have missed the announcement, yes, Xi Jinping is now, at any rate, they've lifted the idea of term limits and the idea that a Chinese president can only be a president for 2 terms. And this is Xi Jinping's second term, so the obvious implication is he's going to try to stay on for another term or another several, and perhaps dictator for life. Again, I don't think this is completely surprising or out of the blue, but at any rate, it certainly shows that Xi Jinping is really trying to consolidate his power and basically become the next Mao Zedong.
Why is the Apple iCloud going to be run out of China?
Because the Chinese government has put in certain rules and restrictions on how companies can operate in their country, and one of those is that any information that is being stored in a database for retrieval on users in China has to be physically located in China. So Apple is the first to bend over backwards for this and to actually move their iCloud data to China to comply with this. That's for obvious reasons. I think that should be very worrying for people who are concerned about any idea of privacy. But then again, considering Microsoft and Apple and Google and all of these corporations have been complying with and cooperating with the Chinese government for many years now, including Google agreeing to censor certain things and all of this type of stuff, again, perhaps it's not completely surprising.
Do you have an Apple phone?
I do, in fact.
Does it bother you that the information is going to be stored in China?
Well, I do not use iCloud, and I never would, so it doesn't bother me personally in that respect, and quite frankly, I think I'm not going to replace this phone once it gets to a certain age because, as you say, I think there are some deeply disturbing things about the power that Silicon Valley has right now, and the fact that they are so willing to work with the Chinese government and the U.S. government and others to abrogate the privacy of their users.
Are the U.S. and China likely to engage in fair trade?
Well, that's a very broad question, and I guess the question is in what time frame are we talking about and what scope of cooperation? Obviously, it depends so much on the relationship of whoever's in power at the time, and perhaps that equation has been solved on the Chinese side. Perhaps it's going to be Xi Jinping for the foreseeable future, but at any rate, in the United States side, the Trump administration, even within the Trump administration, the real question is who's calling the shots and what is the policy towards China, and that seems to change, or the signals seem to change on an ongoing basis, and then factor in the potential for a change in government 3 years down the road, and that could completely derail any agreements that are made now. So it's a very volatile relationship, and predicting the way that that's going to develop at this point, I myself am not putting much faith in the talking heads that are pronouncing on the possibilities of the trading relationship and how it's going to develop from here.
If real estate markets crash around the world, are buyers from China likely to sell or hold on to their real estate abroad?
Well, I think people have to understand that the Chinese, a lot of the Chinese real estate investment that's been going on, especially in Western countries, obviously in Vancouver and the BC area, has not been about the property itself so much as the foothold in the foreign country, which is important for legal and technical purposes and getting around to capital controls and things from China. So getting that money out the door through real estate has been one of the ways that people in China who are part of this rising entrepreneurial class, shall we say, are trying to secure footholds in other countries. So for that reason, again, I don't think they're not market participants in the sense that they're worried about the dollar value of their holdings per se. I think the holdings themselves are more important, the actual physical real estate. So I would imagine that even in the event of a significant downturn, as is now being talked about quite a lot, obviously in the Canadian housing market, I would imagine that the Chinese would not exactly be motivated sellers in that environment. Certainly some of them might want to divest, but I imagine a lot of them are holding on to that property for very different reasons.
James, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you for having me on.
My guest has been James Corbett, publisher of the CorbettReport.com. He was speaking to us from Japan. If you have any questions for James or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.